I I did, and honestly, I don't think I'll be buying any of their albums. They're maybe a little too simplistic for my taste. I prefer a little bit more in my music. I just I just listened to like listen to their most popular song, and to be honest, I found it simplistic and repetitive. So I didn't really get too much into listening to more. The way I see dreams is that's the mind aspect of the body mind apparent dualism, and the way that the physical realm leaks into the thought realm. From the thought realm's perspective, that's dreams. So when you're having a dream, because you're in sleep, you're in this kind of in between netherworld of being in the thought realm and the physical realm. So from the perspective of the the being that's in the thought realm, dreams is the way that the physical realm leaking into the thought realm affects the thought realm. And technology is the way that the thought realm affects the physical realm in the way when it leaks in. So dreams are obviously things, phenomenon, and but they're not things, right? So thoughts are not things, but they're not nothing. So in my fundamental model of reality, that would be on the non-thing side, right? The thought realm. Dreams are in the thought realm, which are not nothing, but they're non-things. And it's always the singularity, the self, that's in the middle, kind of like the fulcrum of both of those. The singularity is that from which the thought realm and the physical realm both appear. I don't know. I wouldn't put too much effort into trying to interpret dreams because that's all just thought again. It's just really just interesting to the mind to try to figure out if there's meaning in the dreams. Even the greatest epiphany passes, right? It even epiphanies to a certain degree are delusion. Hmm. Uh-oh, here comes a kitty. There's technology now that can interpret brain activity. A computer can identify what the thoughts are, like what's the vision that a person in their mind's eye is having just by reading the electrical impulses in the brain. So soon enough, there will be technology that will be able to record dreams, probably. It's very rough right now, but it'll get fine tuned, I'm sure. Well, it's moving in that direction, right? This something we should have never gotten into electricity, like the electrons are not really part of the physical realm. And it's really all everything is malleable. And everything in a way is placebo in a way. There's always this interaction between what's objective and what's subjective. And there's always this communication going on where there it seems like there's coming to an agreement, or it's like temperature, that two things of different temperature are always trying to reach a uniform temperature. So the appearances of the thought realm and the physical realm, they're both changing, adapting in relation to the other. So they're always moving towards unification, just like two items of different temperature, like dropping an ice cube into some water. That system will eventually find homeostasis. And that's what's going on all the time between body and mind. So there isn't really anything that's objective or anything that's purely subjective. But electricity, right, is it's not the realm of gravity. Electromagnetism is part of the other three forces, right? There's gravity and then there's the other three forces. And those other three forces we shouldn't be messing around with. That it's a red herring, it's a wild goose chase, whatever you want to call it. We shouldn't be investigating these other dimensions. This is the tool, this body is the tool, and just through reasoning and pure observation of your direct experience, everything can be realized. And trying to figure out, dissecting the tool, this body mind complex, investigating the tool isn't going to help you use the tool. It's the misuse of it's not using the tool to come to the realization that this whole game is about. So electricity is unnatural. As convenient as it is, it's not natural. And it's developing into the digital realm. Well, not you and me, but the vast majority of human consciousness is going to transition into the hardware software complex. It's the exact same phenomenon or fundamental process that's going on as the mind body complex. The mind body complex, mind body spirit, hardware software spirit, there's no difference. Same spirit, different process, different iteration. Same spirit, different iteration. Yep. See, the superpower is learning to find that stillness, the Satchitananda, the Mona, whatever you want to call it, the stillness between the thoughts, to be able to pull your attention inward so you're not outwardly focused on senses and thoughts at the time of death or at the time of any type of apparent suffering. That's your superpower. That's where you head. That's what you focus on. You pull the attention inward and stick with the reality rather than the appearances. Someone that's fully in delusion is tough to break out of delusion. Yeah. Another way of looking at it is digital and analog, right? Analog, you could say that gravity is analog, and then the other three forces are digital, and we're switching from an analog reality to a digital reality. Apparent reality. Wave, quote unquote, wave is analog and particle is digital. And we're getting so close to the singularity being the extinction event when we're forced, when we will finally realize, when we finally meet the maker, we're forced to. We're getting so close to that the two polarities are glaringly obvious. We can see and experience both the analog and the digital as they merge together in the singularity that is you. But if you're watching television, you won't be aware that all of this is happening and you'll miss the show. So much is being revealed right now, but because Maya has us mesmerized by what thought has created, we miss it. It's going on right before our eyes, and yet we can't recognize what's happening right before our eyes because we're distracted. mesmerized by our own creation. Well, hi, Kitty. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Callie will probably leave now because Callie doesn't really like Kitty. Hey? Cat sang. Nice. They're drawn to satsang. What can I say? Hey? Yeah. Those cats are pretty much enlightened anyway. Just freaking lay around and sleep 15 hours a day. That's pretty sweet. Yeah. My stand is one of these cat playpens. Cat. And it's when I say that the singularity is approaching, I'm just using a time-based relative relativity. I don't know, relative frame of reference, because you actually are the singularity and it's coming to you. So you are the center of your universe, of your world, and both of these things are rushing into you. Yeah, it's all there's only one singularity, right? There's only one singularity. Otherwise it wouldn't be singularity. So that is the self. That is Brahman. That which is looking through your eyes is that which is looking through these eyes. It's the same awareness. Different content, same awareness, same frame of reference for the content. And what if each dream character, let's say that there's random dream characters that you don't even know in your dream. What if that actually is a shared dream with other consciousnesses, other people, that they're having the same dream only from their perspective, and then you're a non-player character from their perspective? Like if I have a dream about you in and then I just happen to forget that dream. I know I had a dream, but I don't remember the details, and I don't remember specifically that it was you, and you had the same dream, very similar, and you weren't sure, it was very vague, and you didn't know that it was me. Then we could all be having, just like a video game, we could all be sharing the same dream from different perspectives. So there's been an interesting development that has the potential to help bring humanity closer to truth. Um, Someone has actually gotten back to me and watched the last video that I made, the 15-minute one, and explaining how my theory resolves the greatest philosophical question about mathematics. And then that person, after he watched that video, he said, "Interesting, do you have it written down?" And then I provided the link to the blog at my website there, explaining it in text. So, yeah. I think that last video that I made makes it pretty convincing argument that if it's valid to ask the question, why does mathematics appear to have both discovered and invented qualities? If that's a valid question, and my theory provides a definite answer to that, why it would appear so, then it's a valid argument that requires some discussion. And I think maybe someone is brave enough and objective enough to present a contradictory theory to mathematics as a whole, a contrarian, completely 100% contrarian perspective. I think that's important to investigate a contrarian perspective if it's reasonably valid. That is the method of investigation, isn't it? You have to investigate contrary arguments. Don't I? I'll look into that. This would be a major breakthrough if this person were to interview me. Share what again? Sorry. Yeah, and I'll post it somewhere on the YouTube channel. Pin it. That's the word. Pin it. Man, I hope it works out too. I, I just saw this morning, I just saw a short on YouTube about this guy talking about the next season, and it's all mathematics. Like, this is not a coincidence that the next season he's interviewing specifically the top mathematicians in the world, Edward Frankel being one of them, about mathematics and how it's right closer to truth, and mine is a completely contradictory perspective, contrarian perspective. I know, I had the same. It's like, just throw mine on at the because I'm sure most of these interviews have already taken place, right? Like, I'm pretty sure that it's already been pre-recorded and he's just going to throw them up in sequences. But then at the very end, to just throw mine in at the very end, just to throw a big question mark into all of it. I fuck. There's three of us here. I could just say it. I don't know why I'm not saying it, but closer to truth. Real subtle. Real subtle. I asked him after 20, so the original email that I sent him, I said, so after 22 years, 22 seasons of getting closer to the truth, do you feel that you're actually closer to the truth? And if you are, please share it with me. Please share with me what that truth is. And then he got back to me. So I think you can only go on the treadmill for so long. You can only chase your tail for so long before you realize this has gotten me fucking nowhere, right? Like Kurt has said himself, he's no fucking closer to understanding anything. He's probably more confused than he ever has been. I mean, that's Maya's greatest play, isn't it? Satan's greatest play is to just convince us that the path that we've taken is the path of truth. It's exactly 180 degrees the wrong way, exactly inverted, which would be something that the greatest opponent in history would play. That's the play that, I mean, you fooled them. You fooled. Well, just reason, right? Like reasonable. If you make, I think that if you make reasonable statements that don't require too big of a jump in between, too big of a jump of faith, you make reasonable statements, then there's no way that a reasonable person, well, can deny that, right? Like, the reason why mathematicians ask the question, is math discovered or invented, is because it displays discovered and invented qualities in superposition. So if that's true, if it does exhibit discovered and invented qualities in superposition, then it's valid to ask the question, why? Why does it appear? Why does mathematics appear to possess both discovered and invented qualities in superposition? That's a valid question. To ask whether it's one or the other is making an assumption. It's overlooking the reality of the experience of the mathematician who's experiencing this thing as exhibiting both discovered and invented qualities in superposition. So it asks the question, why? Why does it appear that way? And if a valid answer, like an actual phenomenal existence thing that exists that can be experienced, proves why it appears that way, then how can a person deny that? Well, that's exactly right. And that's the step that I think most mathematicians or philosophers can take, right? Is that obviously a person can ask why math appears the way it appears, right? It appears to have this dualistic quality in superposition. Why? So then if you come up with, oh, well, this is a reason why, it's a completely valid reason why, they're only left with, yes, I understand it. Yes, it makes sense. And I don't, right? If someone says, I don't understand this, it doesn't make sense, then I'm sorry, you're in complete delusion or you're an idiot. Now, I can understand how people would say, I understand this and I just don't accept it. I just, but they'll, instead of saying, I understand this and I don't accept it, they'll say, it doesn't make sense. No, even though they might not be able to point out exactly where it doesn't make sense, they'll just say, no, it doesn't make sense. It's not possible. Therefore, it's just not possible because it doesn't align with my worldview. There's Paige. There's no such thing as photons. It's just a narrative. It's all made up in scientists' heads. We never should have started investigating the brain. Like the brain is like a quantum device that transmits analog to digital and digital back to analog. Yeah, people like Carl. The problem with all these really smart guys that everyone likes to listen to is that they never ever have a conclusion. They say a lot of really smart things that in and of themselves kind of make sense and are interesting, but then when you lump it all together, there's no formula, there's no conclusion to it, there's no answer, it's just a bunch of statements that seem to make sense at the time. But when you put them all together, it's just a mishmash of interesting comments that that aren't congruent. They don't lead anywhere. They're just interesting. So that fulfills, I think, therefore I am. Right? People love listening to it because they're focused on something. That's it. Something that's interesting, so that temporarily satiates the mind. And then when that talk is done, it just goes back to the regular state of ignorance. The problem is that they've all gone through academia. They've all been brainwashed. They've all been programmed by academia, by the scientific process itself. So it's really hard, no matter, especially if you're really super intelligent, because you can fool yourself. And then when you get everyone around you that's super intelligent and you're all agreeing upon all these really smart things that you're saying, then it's really hard to realize that actually you're in delusion and actually all that stuff is bullshit. It's just noise that Maya is convincing you that's truth, so that you take attention away from what I'm trying to express here. It's all boils down to your awareness and where you put it. there's a saying, standing on the shoulders of giants, but it's more like just following them deeper into delusion. And it's the academic, like you have to cite, right? To write an academic paper, you have to cite all of these other dudes, mostly dudes, that have said these things that they have assumed to be fact, right? It's an assumed fact, and now you're basing your argument on these facts. But they're assumptions, they're not facts, they're just assumptions that most people in academia agree with. That's they agree that it's truth, I guess. But if the initial assumption is incorrect, every step you take based on that, if it's a stairway and you have to take the steps that you think are basis of truth, each step is a basis of truth, but it's actually not, then you just keep going deeper into delusion all the time, thinking that you're going deeper into truth, which is Satan's greatest play. It's the bluff of the millennia, right? If this was poker, it would be the bluff of all time, and we're falling for it. The entire society, all of civilization is based upon these assumptions that are all incorrect. No wonder we're in samsara. No wonder we're in Kali Yuga, the very end of the cycle. It's, you can't get more deluded than we are. And the degree of suffering and anxiety that we're going, human consciousness is going through, is evidence of all of this. The irony is just beautiful. The final truth should include irony. There has to be humor in this somewhere. It's funny. You've been practicing your spiritual one-liners. When you've when you've found what you've been seeking, which is you, then the seeking ends. The irony of seeking for yourself is also delicious, right? Write it down and then post it on Facebook with one of those fancy backdrops or whatever, so you can appear spiritual. Lankin does what? I think that guy's too proud to admit that someone else had a more constructive or practical theory. I get the feeling that I'm the world's smartest man and that's it from him. Half of his stuff is just semantics. At least half of his stuff is just semantics. You don't need to invent new words. Like, if you're inventing a whole bunch of new shit, it's probably wrong. Oh, the quotes with the pretty pic in the background. Yeah. Yeah, that's trying to prove to other people how spiritual witty you are, how spiritually clever. It's wit and clever. Yeah, he's a smart guy apparently. But Maya just goes, oh, that's an intelligent one. I can really dupe that one, right? Intelligence doesn't help at all. It's all about the ego. If an intelligent, brilliant person still is in delusion, it doesn't mean that you can see. Usually, intelligence means that you can see and explain the illusion very clearly, but that doesn't mean that you know anything about the reality. At least that Carl guy, Carl Friston. At least he seems like he's happy. He's more or less pleasant and happy, whereas Langan is not a happy dude. Doesn't seem like he's very happy. Yeah, these are all valid points, SS. Yeah, for sure. If one does not recognize that language and symbol itself is, oh boy, how do I put this? Language and symbol itself is that which projects the illusion, then you'll just keep trying to use it as a tool to reveal truth. But all it does is reveal illusion, is project duality and illusion. So you have to transcend language. You have to use language and symbol in the minimum amount possible to break consciousness out of the delusion that symbol has caused, right? So that's why the what I call the meta singularity theory and the the fundamental model of reality. The fundamental model of reality explains reality, all of it, using symbols, three symbols to explain and express the functionings of reality itself, right? Three, three bits of information to explain and express and describe the fundamental workings of reality. And then the meta singularity, well, that's two. That pares it down to even less less symbols, fewer symbols. So that means it's even more compact. And that's the relationship of Brahman and Atman. And that's why the relationship of Brahman and Atman is the core of Hinduism. Hinduism's pretty big, right? It's kind of a big deal. Hinduism. So that's the same. It's two characters expressing all, all. So but that requires interpretation. You see, it requires intuition and interpretation. You can't be all just logic, right? Because logic always begins with an assumption. If, then. The if is an assumption. So you can't end logic with logic. Logic begins with an assumption and it must end on an assumption. It takes a leap of faith to get where you're going to. So that's what all these guys are trying to do, Langan included, is trying to find the final concluding truth using just logic, just basically if and then statements. But it has to conclude where it began with an assumption. Or with intuition, maybe is better word than assumption. Like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's just a normal dude. If this progresses as it could, maybe I would end up talking to Joe someday. Joe and I would hit it off really well. Pretty sure he'd be open to a lot of this stuff too. He's a really good pool player. I'm going to. The next person that interviews me, I'm going to force them to just sit for like just 1 minute of silence. And then we can discuss. Yeah, everyone gets really agitated, right? Like the anxiety level increases when there's silence, right? So I'm just going to say, all right, well, let's just sit for 1 minute and try to remain, try to find your happiness, try to be thought free. Go. And then after that minute, we experiences in just that minute. And I'll be able to listen Sat Chidananda. And guaranteed my interviewer will not find any happiness. They will just find blah 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 up here, right? Guaranteed. So that's what's going to happen. Just 1 freaking minute, right? Yeah. It's such a simple experiment, and yet it reveals so much. Just if you're a happy person, then you should be able to just sit in a chair and be happy, right? If you're happy, your underlying beingness is happiness, then when you're just sitting, not doing anything or thinking anything, just your lowest energy state, you should realize happiness. But people are seeking interest, right? They want to be interested, but that's not happiness. Being interested is not happiness. Happiness is sitting here with this stupid little grin on your face. That's what happiness is. Maybe with your head tilted. Like kind of almost drooling because you're so fucking happy and content. That's what I'm talking about. It's not being interested. You're interested in something else, not thoughts. But that we that's why we worship entertainers, right? We want someone to hold our interest without any gaps in between of boredom or stillness. We just want all movement and all outwardly focused attention. Though the ego does. The ego is gets its existence from outwardly facing attention, outwardly focused attention. That's where the ego derives its existence from. You spoiled the surprise. You named his name. Now I'm in trouble. But after 22 seasons, you got to mix it up a bit, buddy. Right? You're just going around and like Kurt is just going around in circles, interviewing the same fucking dozen people over and over and over and getting them to talk amongst themselves in different combinations of these dozen people. It's you're going nowhere. You're a dog chasing its tail. Time to try something totally radical and different. Like science itself is at that spot. We've followed the scientific process for what, 450 years now? And look at the state of humanity. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is what, an indication of insanity? So scientists are insane because we've followed that route and look at where it's gotten us. It was the wrong path. Science was the wrong path. And it's time for scientists to acknowledge this and begin a different investigation, a different endeavor to try to find reality. I watched a little, just the first few minutes of Chalmers, that one that Kurt actually posted. I watched a few minutes of it, and basically he was saying his conclusion to his theory is that, yeah, probably we're in a simulation, but we should just accept that we are and just enjoy it. Like, just basically just like, yeah, it's in one way he calls it a simulation, but then he says it's just as valid a reality as any other reality. Like a virtual reality, a simulation is just, oh, and I want to, well, how did he put it? It's hilarious the way he put it. I think I wrote it. Yeah. So that Chalmers guy, he's got a degree in philosophy and language, right? So he knows language, right? He knows language because he studied it. And this is what he said. This is the conclusion that he came to. Now, listen to the wording. In many respects, this is a quote, in many respects, virtual reality is in principle on a par with physical reality. That's gobbledygook, meaning nothing. It's so vague and abstract as to mean nothing. In many respects, virtual reality is in principle on a par with physical reality. Well, then what's the point of philosophy? What's the point of everything that you've done? And yet he's brilliant. He's the one that came up with the hard problem of consciousness. And people can't see through his language how he's actually really just saying a bunch of words again that people can't discern, that he's basically just pulling the wool over your eyes with this vagueness. And he's one of the greatest geniuses alive, right? And he's basically saying, meh, it is what it is. It's probably a simulation, but we just got to learn to deal with it. Holy shit. Just give up. He's just given up. Basically, he's given up. It's okay to just give up. Unfucking real, man. And that's Maya just saying, yeah, just give up. Yeah, it's you're in delusion. You're in a simulation. And let's not try to equate that to suffering, like, right? Like, let's not make the obvious connection between believing that you're in a simulation when you're not and the experience of suffering. Philosophical speak, yeah, slow. A lot of words saying nothing. Yeah, Maya has us. We are mesmerized by the system that is symbol and language. Completely fucking mesmerized. People don't try to discern for themselves what's true anymore. It's just, oh, a lot of other people believe this guy is smart. So therefore, I will just take it for granted that he's smart and that he's saying truth because all these other people are taking him to say truth, I guess. Yeah, I couldn't listen to him after that, right? Like, to me, that's just blatantly, well, he's just going to say shit like this through the whole presentation, isn't he? I had to turn it off because it fucking, it, it's like there's a thorn in my shoe and I can't keep walking. Like, it's too obvious what's going on here. I can't continue. I've got to call bullshit on it right away. And this is the discussions that I hear Vervaeke and all these guys. It's basically the same speak, right? It's all philosophical speak, leading nowhere. Do I exist? Yes, you exist. Do I exist? Yes, you exist. Oh, very well put. You exist too. Yes, yes, we all exist. That's what they're saying. That's what they're doing. That's what I hear. The meaning crisis. And yet, what's the conclusion? What do all of your words mean? What do your words mean, John? I had a quick interaction with John Vervaeke when it was back in Twitter time, and it didn't last very long. He opted out of that conversation pretty fucking quick. Just stopped. Just stopped. Usually when I ask them for like, okay, well, what's your theory then? What is just write it down in one paragraph or a couple sentences. What is your conclusion? What's the conclusion? There is no conclusion. The top echelon of academia. So therefore they're probably worshipped by most and hardly ever face any pushback at all. And when they do, they just ignore it.